Coming to you live from Denver, Colorado, the Mile High City. It's the Sports Wagering Zone on this, the first big day of the 2021, still in 1900, 2021 football season. It's been a long day so far, even though it's only been a couple hours so far. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Glad to be here. It's Sunday. And of course, it's NFL first Sunday. Got a lot to talk about, primarily the NFL games. We have 4 games we're going to take a close look at, give you an idea as to how the line movement is going, as well as which direction the pros are going. So stand by. Anyway, you're listening to us right here, live on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, and also podcasting on most of the major podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify or even Google Podcast as well. So anyway, thanks for listening. And we're going to be here for the next 35 to 40 minutes talking about NFL action for today. And the 4 games that we're going to take a close look at because they're getting the most action right now. That's going to be Pittsburgh against Buffalo, the Jets against Carolina, Cleveland, Kansas City, Denver, and the New York Giants are going to take a look and see which direction the money is flowing in those particular games. And of course, we'll take it from there. So anyway, here we go. Let's get a look at what happened yesterday. If you've listened to the show before, one of the first things we do is tell you some of the things that happened yesterday and kind of give you an idea as to what's been going on, especially in Major League Baseball. The favorites went 9-7 on Saturday. The Yankees were a -115, and they beat the Mets 8-7 in a game that was played in New York on the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attack. The favorites are still at 59.4% for the season. The overs went 12-3-1 yesterday. That cut the unders lead down to 50.2%. In the meantime, in college football, big money was made if you bet on Stanford. Stanford upset number 14 USC, the Trojans, 17.5-point dog. Stanford was a 17.5-point dog, and they won outright. They were a plus 637 on the money line. 637. You laid 100, you won 100. You won $637. Also late Saturday, number 12 Oregon upset number 3 Ohio State 35-28. The Ducks closed as a 15-point road underdog, and they were a plus 500 on the money line as well. The only other top 25 teams to lose were number 15 Texas. They lost 40-21, losing to Arkansas. Arkansas being a 6-point dog and being a plus 190 on the money line. And number 21 Utah, 26-17 loss to BYU. BYU was a 7.5-point underdog, a plus 230 on the money line. So you can see how the money line affects college football, and mainly because there are just so many games out there to be played. In the NFL, you've got 15, 16 games a week. Here you have 55 to 60 games to choose from. So they kind of get spread out. Most people stay with some of the big games. They stay with those. But there are also other little games that are going on throughout the country. And Vegas and various sports books do have lines on just about every one of them. So that's kind of a roundup. College football yesterday. It's going to be pro football today. The NFL season finally really gets going today with the full slate of games. And, of course, we got the game tomorrow night in Las Vegas between the Raiders and the Ravens. That's going to be the Monday night game tomorrow. But today we have a whole slew of games to go. And like I said, we're going to take a close look at 4 of those games. Take a look at the line movement in those games and give you an idea as to which direction the money is flowing. In the meantime, let's get that first break out of the way. And if you've listened to the show before, we take 3 breaks in the show, each one 1 minute duration. So if that's the case, we'll be back in 1 minute with NFL. And here we go. It's NFL Day, the first full Sunday NFL action in 2021. Yes, here we go. We're going to take a look at 4 games, take a look at them, and kind of get a general idea as to which direction the money's flowing, which way the lines are going. And of course, once we determine that, we can also determine which direction the pros, sharps, whatever you want to call them, the wise guys, some people call them, okay, see which direction they go. But just a reminder that you're listening to us right here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, or perhaps you're listening on one of the podcast platforms such as Apple or Google or Sprecher or Spotify. We're on most of the major podcast platforms as well. So let's take a look at week number 1 of the NFL regular season. Finally, it's here. And you know what? Historically speaking, the first week of the season has really been a great time to what we call buy low on underdogs. Because, after all, the NFL is probably the most popular sport, and the public loves betting favorites. Remember that. Understand something. They have all this data. The sportsbooks are well aware of the tendencies of the general public and how they bet. They've been following them for decades, okay? So here we go. You're looking at favorites. They love home teams, and they also love betting on big name players as well. So when they do this, it creates value that goes the other way because the lines get inflated to kind of match what's coming in on the other side. And so you go the other way, you back the underdogs, especially in what we call buy low spots based on some recency biases, okay? So over the past 10 years, week 1 dogs have gone 55.1% so far. Remember, 52.3 is your break-even point. Now, you say, well, it's only 3 percentage points. Well, that's big. Put the numbers together. You'll see what happens, what that 3% difference makes as far as how much money you're going to make percentage-wise. Now, the big dogs, these are dogs that are 6 points or more, have gone 58%. It's even higher, okay? So road dogs who missed the playoffs and the previous season have gone against the spread at 62%. So road dogs who missed the playoffs are at 62%. So if you take a look at a road dog, wasn't in the playoffs last year, 62.5%, the win percentage over the past 10 years. Now, divisional dogs have really been the most profitable ones. The divisional dogs are at almost 68% as far as a win percentage is concerned. So that's kind of historical data for you. That's what we're dealing with here. Following the numbers, making sure that you get a perspective as to what's been going on. And as you know, as the season begins, as smart as they are, as clever as they may be, when they put all their data together to come up with the lines for that first set of games, this first few days, first few weeks, what's going to happen is they're going to slip here, they're going to slip there. The public's going to come in because they're unsure of themselves early in the season also. So they're going to be betting the favorites. That means the favorites line goes up. Same time, the dog line goes up in your favor as well. So right here at the zone, we are definitely contrarians. We love to bet on dogs. We love to talk about dogs. But again, we give you that information, and then you take it from there and do what you want. So let's take a look at the games for today. To start off with, at 1 o'clock, you got the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Buffalo Bills. Now, the odds makers opened this line with Buffalo as a 6-point home favorite. The public, they're all over Bills, especially the Bills Mafia, okay? They went an impressive 13-3 last season. They won the AFC East, and they reached the AFC title game. Now, in the meantime, if you remember last season, the Steelers finished 12-4, but they crumbled down the stretch, going just 1-5 in their last 6 games, including that early loss in the first playoff game, so they didn't go any further. If you remember, they had 11 wins in a row before they finally started losing. Now, heavy public betting, in the meantime, has pushed Buffalo from being a 6 to a 7-point favorite. Now, the line rose a full point. The pros pounced on Pittsburgh because they wanted to get that key number of 7. 3, 7, and 10 are your key numbers, which means that most of the games end either 3, 7, or 10 points apart. So that's why they are key numbers. So that dropped the line back down to 6.5. Now, Pittsburgh is a contrarian in a really heavily bet game. It's the first game at 1 o'clock, and it also matches some of the profitable betting pattern systems as well. The NFL Week 1 big dogs, like we talked about, 6.5 or more, are at 61% this season over the past 10 years. Also, Mike Tomlin has been a great bet when getting points. He goes 67% whenever he's the dog. So the under has taken in some action as well. It dropped from 50 down to 48. The forecast calls for 15-mile-per-hour winds. The game's played at New Era Stadium. And, of course, that is the story as far as the pros are concerned. They do like Pittsburgh. Before we went on the air, it's at 6, 6.5. Now, understand something. The pros really jumped on it once it got to 7. Now that it's back down, they may back it up a little bit by going the other way. So this is some kind of right in the middle right here. But if you can get 7, definitely go with Pittsburgh because that's how the pros are going. If not, kind of think about it. 6.5 may not be a bad idea also. But again, we leave all that information up to you to decide what to do with. Meanwhile, also at 1 o'clock, you got the Jets and the Carolina Panthers. This is a pretty well put together game. I'll tell you one thing about the NFL. When they go to make up schedules, they try to make the most important schedules. They try to bring teams together. You have the Jets and the Panthers. Panthers had the former Jets quarterback. That kind of puts them together there. Now, both of these are non-conference teams. They're looking to bounce back from really losing seasons last year. The Jets, well, remember them. They went 2-14 last year. But there's some reason for optimism in New York. You got that rookie quarterback, Zach Wilson, and they have a new head coach, Robert Saleh. In the meantime, the Panthers, they went 5-11 last year, and they look to take the next step under their second-year coach, Matt Rule, and they have a new starting quarterback, former Jet Sam Darnold. So as we look at the line in this game, it opened with Carolina listed as a 4-point home favorite. The public wants nothing to do with the Jets, and they're rushing to lay that short spread with Carolina at home. Now, this lopsided betting pushed the line up Carolina to being a 5-point favorite. Now, since that time, we've seen some steady, sharp action on the Jets plus the points, dropping that line down to 3.5, and in some places at 4. It all, again, depends on which part of the country you happen to be in. Week 1 road dogs, like we said, who missed the playoffs the year before. And, of course, the Jets fall into that category very easily. They're at almost 63% over the past 10 years. So that's something to take a look at. Now, the pros have leaned on the over in this game, forcing the odds makers to up that low total from 43 up to 45. So in this game, the pros definitely on the New York Jets. We have 2 more games to look at. We got Cleveland against Kansas City, and we have the Broncos against the Giants. So let's take a look at Cleveland against Kansas City. It's the 4:30 game, the late game. This is an AFC divisional round rematch. You got the Chiefs, who won 22-17, but the Browns covered, is the most heavily bet game of this late afternoon. Cleveland is coming off an 11-5 campaign. The Chiefs went 14-2, but they lost in the Super Bowl, of course, to the Bucs, 31-9. They lost outright as 3-point favorites in that game, if you remember. Now, the line opened with Kansas City listed as a 6-point home favorite. Now, the public, they love the Chiefs. They can't stop betting on the Chiefs, who are consistently, without a doubt, the most popular team each week for these recreational bettors. But as usual, despite roughly 2/3 of the bets laying the points, this line has dropped to 5.5. This means that the pros are on a reverse line movement on Cleveland and grabbing the points and expecting a really close game. The latest odds that we saw before we went on the air was Cleveland 5 to 5.5 points. Okay. Now, week one road dogs, once again, they're at little over 57% over the past 10 years. We could also be looking at a high scoring game here too. The total opened at 52.5. It's been steamed up to 54.5. That's the highest total of any game that's being played this week, week one in the NFL. The highest game so far. Okay, so in that game, once again, the pros on the Cleveland Browns over the Kansas City Chiefs. So we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Broncos and the Giants and take a look at some other line movements that have been going on, but not in full detail, just to kind of bring those to your attention in case these are other games that you might be thinking about betting on and might be interested in knowing in which direction those lines are going. So it's time to take that break. Like I said, each break is 60 seconds long. So if that's the case, when we come back, we'll be talking about Denver and the Giants. Take a look at some other line moves, some other games. And of course, as usual, we're going to take a look and see what Chris has to say as far as how he came up with the numbers, how the sports books came up with those numbers, how they moved from May to now. Because in May, that's when they first came out. They've been out there for quite a while. Had a good chance to kind of study those numbers for the next few months. So we'll see how that came out with Chris Andrews, who is, of course, the sportsbook director over at Southport in Las Vegas. So let's get that break out of the way, and we'll be back in 1 minute. And here we go again. Welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo coming to you live from Denver, Colorado, the Mile High City. That's what they call it right here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. Of course, we're podcasting on most of the major podcast platforms, such as Apple, Google, Spotify, you name it. We're just about everywhere. So we took a look at the games earlier today. In case you just tuned in, the first game we talked about was the Steelers against the Bills. In that particular game, the pros are on the Steelers. In the Jets and Carolina game, they're kind of leaning to the Jets in that game. And of course, that is they're an underdog in that game. They were 3.5 to 4. Pittsburgh 6.5 last we looked at. And then finally, there's Cleveland and Kansas City, 5.5 on the plus side for Cleveland. So far, the three games we've talked about all underdogs chosen by the pros according to the line movement and the way the money has been flowing. In the meantime, the final game we want to take a close look at is the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants. This is a non-conference game. It features the biggest line move of the week one so far. Denver coming off a 5-11 season. The Giants went 6-10, if you remember. So the line opened with Denver. They were a short 1-point road favorite. The pros have hammered the Broncos. They steamed Denver up from -1 to the key number of being a 3-point favorite. The pros targeted Denver anything -2.5 or less. Okay, so anytime the line was at 3 or less, they came in on Denver, laying some more money. Okay, now although we haven't seen any really big buyback on the Giants at that inflated 3 price, late Denver money may like the line play at -155 on the money line. So if you're thinking about betting on Denver, but you're saying, yeah, I got to lay 3 points or maybe even 3.5 before game time actually begins, you can switch over and go over onto the money line, which right now is at -155. So instead of laying the worst of it, you're going to be at least, all they have to do is win the game. Okay, because they still have to win. You're going to be laying 155 to win 100. Now, Terry Bridgewater is the main reason why the pros love the Broncos in this game. We saw the Broncos get steamed up once Vic Fangio, the coach of the team, said that Teddy was going to be the starter over Drew Lock. Bridgewater, without a doubt, is one of the best quarterbacks to back in the NFL in terms of betting, going 35-14 or 71% in his career as a starter. 71.4% in his entire career as a starter. Now, the pros are leaning on the under in this game. They drove the total down from 42.5 down to 41.5. So in this game, the pros are on the Broncos, but only up to being a 3-point favorite. Anything over a 3-point favorite, they're not touching the Broncos in this situation, just so you have a general idea as to how things are going. Now, there are some other line moves that might be of some interest to you, because these 4 games we talked about, you may not have no interest in betting on. So as we look at some other games, Washington, and we've been watching Washington and the Chargers all week long. It was one of those games we saw one team being a 1-point favorite, then becoming a 1-point dog, and then it was a pick 'em, then a 1-point favorite. It kind of bounced around back and forth all week long. Finally, right now, it's settling down. Washington, that started out, it opened as a 1-point dog, is now a 1.5-point favorite against the Chargers. Now, in the Cardinals and Titans game, the over went from 51 up to 53.5. The Eagles-Falcons game, the over that started at 47 went up to 48.5. The Seahawks, who were a 3-point dog, here's another big flip, are now a 3-point favorite against the Colts. The Seahawks and Colts over-under went from being a 52 to 49 once this other number changed as well. Now, the Dolphins-Patriots game, the under went from 45.5 down to 43.5. Now, the Packers, who were 3-point favorites at the opening, are now 3.5-point favorites against the Saints. And finally, in your late night game on NBC, the 8:15, 8:20 game, whatever you want to call it, the Bears and the Rams, the over went up, went from 45 up to 46.5. So that's the story on some other games, kind of give you an idea as to how some of the numbers are going. But in the meantime, the 4 games that we took a close look at, as to which direction the pros were going. In Pittsburgh against Buffalo, they like to take the 6.5 points at Pittsburgh. Jets against Carolina, they like the Jets as a 3.5 to 4-point favorite underdog in that game. And of course, Cleveland and Kansas City, they like Cleveland as the dog in this game at 5 and 5.5. There's one favorite that they like today, and that's Denver over the Giants. However, they like the Denver Broncos up to being a 3-point favorite. Anything over that, they're staying away from any further bets. As long as this stays at 3 or under, they're going to keep pouring money in on Denver. If it does move to 3.5, because if they come in even stronger with more money, there's a good possibility it'll go to that number, and that's when they'll kind of back off and not take it at all. So that's the story as far as those games for today. Time to take our final break. And when we come back, we're going to take a quick look at Chris Andrews and have to see what he has to say. Chris Andrews is the sports director at South Point. It's a casino here in, not here in Denver, but in Las Vegas, Nevada. So we're going to take a look and see what he thought about these 4 games that we talked about, kind of how he put those things together, how the numbers finally came out to where they are right now. So let's take that break. And again, we'll be back into the zone in 1 minute. And here we go again. We're back in the sports wagering zone for the final segment. And of course, this has to do with Chris Andrews, the head over there at South Point Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. Kind of take a look at his thoughts and ideas. And he puts out this report every week to kind of give you guys an idea as to how these numbers come about. Because we've always talked about getting into the heads of the sportsbook directors. These are the guys that put the points together. How do they come about it? What makes them change? This is what we're trying to figure out. So, according to Chris, he says he put up the opening lines for this first week way back in May, and that gave the pros, the general public, like we said before, give you a lot of time to kind of take a look at those numbers and get ready to make your bets. So let's take a look and see how some of this came about. Now, the first game we talked about were the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Buffalo Bills. And again, the pros in this particular game, like the Steelers, they're at 6.5 right now. Now, he opened Buffalo as a 6-point favorite. The pros laid the 6 and 6.5. When he got to 7, they took a $100,000 bet on Pittsburgh plus the points. So he dropped the number down to 6. We're probably going to need Buffalo, needless to say. This total opened at 50.5. The pros bet it all the way down to 48, and it should be a heavily bet game by kickoff time. It's the highest profile game of the early games today. So once again, started at Buffalo as a 6-point favorite because the pros came in, went up to 6.5. They took a big hit, $100,000 bet on Pittsburgh plus the points. So what do? They adjust for that. they dropped the number back down to 6. So what he's saying is they're going to need Buffalo to win this game, okay, in order to try to pull ahead as far as profit is concerned. Meanwhile, the Jets in Carolina, now, not much interest yet, he says. They opened Carolina as a 5-point favorite. He moved them down to 4 after one relatively sharp bet on the dog. Now, money's starting to come back on the Panthers. So what you could call New York money used to find its way to Las Vegas when the Jets and Giants were good. But New Jersey has legalized sports betting, so that kind of changed that a little bit. Now, neither is expected to be good this year. The total has been bet up from 43 to 44.5. Fairly sharp action going on. Probably not going to be a heavily bet game unless some kind of major news comes out. And in this game, the pros are on the Jets at 3.5 or 4. Meanwhile, there's 2 more games that we were talking about earlier. And one of those games, of course, is Cleveland and Kansas City. So here's how he looks at it. The sharper side is definitely Cleveland so far. By sharper, we mean the pros. We don't have to go begging for Kansas City money from the general public because they automatically come in. But the pros were aggressive on the dog at 6, okay? I'm pretty well balanced on the game right now at 5.5. No movement on the total. That tells you that the pros don't like the over, or they would have already acted in that direction. Assume that the pros are waiting to see if the undervalue really comes into play. But as far as the game is concerned, the pros are on Cleveland at 5 and 5.5. And then finally, we talked about Denver and the New York Giants. He says that this one opened as a pick'em. He opened this game as a pick'em back in May. The pros came in. They bet Denver at 1 as a 1-point favorite. So he moved it to 1.5. They came in at 1.5. He moved it up to 2. The pros came in at 2. Went up to 2.5, and they still came in with their money. He finally stopped the pros at 3. Okay, he's evening out at that price. I'll definitely need the Giants to win this game in order to come out ahead. On the total, I got one pro bet on the under and the opener, which was 42.5. And once that happened, he dropped it to 42. So here you can see how the line developed. Started out as a pick'em. You got 2 teams that had terrible seasons last year. There's a question as to how well each team's going to do this year. Denver has a new quarterback. The Giants have a rookie quarterback who's no longer a rookie. He's in his 2nd year. See how he's doing. See how that happens. So what happened was this. He opened them as a pick'em. He wanted to see which direction it was going to go. Pros came in, put their money in on Denver. He went up to being Denver a 1-point favorite. The money still kept coming in. He went up to 1.5. Money still kept coming in. He moved it up to 2. They still kept pouring their money in. When it went to 2.5, the money still kept coming in. He finally went to 3, and that's when the pros stopped coming in heavily. So that gives you an idea as to how these guys operate. And like I said, he took a guess from all the data that he had back in May, thinking that this was going to be a pick'em game. Well, you can see what can happen over that period of time. So that's the story there. Once again, the 4 games we looked at today: Pittsburgh against Buffalo, pros on Pittsburgh; Jets and Carolina, the pros are on the Jets; Cleveland, Kansas City. I know most of the general public, they love Kansas City, but if you take a look at their record last year, they were not a winning team against the spread. Yeah, they won games, but they didn't beat the spread many times. So they like Cleveland in this game. As far as Denver and New York, they like Denver. Now, I just want to quickly bring to date what happened yesterday in college football, because we had 4 picks yesterday that the pros made. I just want to bring this to your attention so that you get an idea as to how yesterday went. Texas A&M against Colorado. They had Colorado with 17.5 points. That was a winner. Iowa State. They liked Iowa State laying 4.5 points. And as you know, Iowa State lost, so that was a loss. North Carolina at Mississippi State. Okay. They had Mississippi State. They won outright. That was a win. Utah against BYU. They had BYU +7. As we know, BYU won that game outright as well. So we had 4 plays yesterday and 3 winners out of those 4 that they had. So that's the story as far as that's concerned. We told you about the 4 games for today. We also gave you an idea as to how Chris Andrews come up with his numbers. And he's no different than the other sportsbook directors as well. They use the same type of information as it comes in. Not only the money that's coming into their facility, but they're also looking out to see what the marketplace is doing, the rest of the places as well, so that they don't lose business because they don't make the move in the right direction as well. So that's the story for today. If you're going to be betting today, I wish you the best of luck, no doubt about it. We have 1 game coming up tomorrow night in Las Vegas between the Raiders and the Ravens. We'll talk about that one tomorrow. And of course, as you know, during the week, we're on at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday. So once again, thanks for listening. I hope you have a great Sunday. I hope you've been having a great weekend so far. Hope you did very well on the college circuit yesterday. Hope you make a little better on the pros today. So until tomorrow at 1 p.m., I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back again on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network and all those platforms for podcasting at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and have a profitable Sunday.